Okay.
Hi, I'm Donna from the St. Johns County Public Library System, and today I have with me Tom Perkins, who's an arson investigator, and we're going to talk a little bit about arson and a little bit about the library book, which Tom was kind enough to read. Hi, Tom. How are you doing today?
Great.
Do you have snow up there?
No, we're supposed to have a green Christmas.
Well, that's going to be exciting for you. Tom, I am so grateful that you read the book. And I wanted to talk to you a little bit about the arson investigation in the book. And so what exactly is the first thing you do as an arson investigator when you're investigating a fire?
Usually you would walk all the way around a building, usually not a building the size of the library, just to see where fire or smoke came out of windows, so you get a better idea of where the fire was. Then you talk to people, the person that called the fire in, maybe arriving firefighters, so they can tell you what they saw. And if a fire is in one room and then spreads to the whole house, you're more interested in that one room where it originated versus worrying about where it spread to. That's where you want to look for the origin of the fire and the cause of it.
Well, there's some discussion in the library book about whether they could really ascertain the origin or what caused that fire. You've read the book, and so in your experience, what do you think?
From reading the book and knowing a little bit of the history of the library, the building itself, right away I questioned the electrical system, housekeeping, whether they had any extension cords running anywhere. And my immediate concerns were that the quality of the building or how it's been upkeep. There's books in the hallways, books. They had 3 working doors out of all the doors, which was a concern for people's safety. But the fire, when it spread, the firefighters used a lot of heavy streams, from ladder trucks. And when that happens, the water streams will move evidence around. They'll wreck everything, wreck the evidence. And sometimes you can only come up with a room of origin, and you can't really find the place of origin.
Well, that building was built in such a way that it was, in my mind, really hard to, because it's like it was built and then kind of added onto, and then they kind of changed the usage of areas a lot. And they had more books in that one library than I can honestly fathom in one place. And I loved the way in the book that they would put like the names of these different books that they had. This fire happened in 1986. And for me, that doesn't seem like that long ago, but then I think about what year it is and I'm like, ooh, that was a long time ago. Have safety laws and safety rules in public buildings changed a lot in 40 years?
Today, a library couldn't be built without sprinklers in it. In the book, they mentioned they didn't want sprinklers because water damages books more than fire. Sprinklers are made to be a life safety thing, so people can get out of the building before a fire spreads. But in a library, it would also be to keep the fire confined. So maybe you lose a room or a section, but you don't lose all the books, and you have such water damage that this fire did. And today the buildings would have more smoke alarms, fire and smoke detectors, so that a fire like that might be found quicker. And an alarm system would tell you where they're sensing smoke, so you don't have to go look for it.
That was one of the things that because of the way the building was built, it was kind of, it burned a while before anybody noticed. And then there's the interesting gentleman who said he started the fire, and that whole investigation side of it that really gets really kind of crazy, because he says he started it, then he says he didn't start it, then the investigators start building a timeline, nothing matches up. And even at the end of the book, I wasn't sure what they decided.
I think today, in an investigation, he would have been a person of interest, but I don't think they had enough to charge him with anything. He was one of those kind of people that would probably confess to a lot of things for the notoriety. He knew a little bit about this because maybe he was there or he was in the library, so he could talk about it in a general way, but I don't think they had enough evidence to charge him with anything.
I tend to agree with you that he was just looking for his 15 minutes that was going to catapult him into his true stardom.
I think so.
Have you ever been involved with a particularly interesting investigation or something that you found to be very challenging?
We had a fire that I was involved in where a homeless person died in a van. There was several homeless people in this abandoned van. They started a fire to stay warm. They were burning, believe it or not, a tire. The tire made so much smoke, everybody got out except for one person. Then we had to go find the rest of these people and interview them and find the family. And it was quite a challenge, but it was very interesting. And, going to a lot of homeless shelters where nobody wants to talk to you and getting them to talk to you, tell you what happened. It was an interesting fire, but an accidental cause. Sometimes accidental is referred to as a careless fire. And a careless fire would be someone that starts a fire where an ordinary person would know better. You don't start a fire on a real windy day and let it spread to your neighbor's barn or something. That's a careless fire. And sometimes it's a stretch to call it an accident. Sometimes someone's got to be held accountable for being so careless. And that's tough.
Well, that is true. And that's regrettable that happened. I know that in the library book, and even today, the Los Angeles Library works with a lot of homeless people and helps a lot of homeless people. And I think every community has a certain amount of people that are in that population that need help and guidance. And I've seen houses that were vacant where people would start a fire in the house and then the house would burn. Because, they just wanted to have a shelter or cook a can of beans or, whatever that they wanted to do. We had a vacant house next door to us, and it was vacant for so long that the fire department burned it as a training exercise. And I have pictures from that when they came out and burned that house as a training exercise, and they did it at dusk. And they did it at dusk on purpose because apparently that's often when you guys get called out for things like this.
Sure.
And so to do it in the middle of the day didn't really give them the training that they needed. So they did it like at dusk. So they had some daylight to control it, but they could experience what an actual fire would be like. And I thought that was interesting to see.
In the library fire, that's such a big building, and the heavy water streams wrecked the evidence or move things around. A lot of times in a fire like that, you would rely on witness information, and the witnesses that sort of picked the suspect out, it's tough to rely on them 100%. If somebody knows the witness, knows their name, knows a little bit of history, that carries a lot more weight than somebody said, I saw a blonde guy in the library. It's,
I see a blonde guy in the library every day.
there you go. And then later to be interviewed and say, that's the guy, that's a tough thing to do. But you rely on statements, interviews from other people, something he might say weeks later. But this guy, I think he was just looking for his little bit of fame.
His story did change a lot. And it was interesting to see that part of it, because there are those people who are drawn to being a part of exciting things that happen in the community, whether they really were involved or not. So
Right.
that was great. I was really interested. I just want to mention it because the entire community came together and loaded up all these water-soaked books and took them to an industrial area and froze them. And it's not about arson, but it's about the recovery of the items during the arson. And I thought it was so interesting that they froze the books and they actually tried to dry them out, and thousands of them were added back to the collection. I found that to be pretty amazing. And I know that
I did too. I thought that was a neat way to do it. I never thought of with it when I read the book. I didn't think that was even possible. And it's interesting when a community comes together. A lot of people that use the library have an interest in books, volunteer to help make this right, and it becomes a community effort. You see that in fires or other tragedies where churches come together, families come together, and all of a sudden your community, it rallies everyone. It's quite an interesting thing that happens there.
well, they raised a lot of money to restore the library, and the building is a very historic, beautiful, intricately designed building. And I think now it's very safe. I know that they have sprinkler systems in the building now. We just had our sprinkler system at the Bartram Trail branch replaced, and it's quite an ordeal, but it has to be done because public safety is really important.
It is, and along with that comes a quicker response time, a quicker alarm than somebody noticing smoke or smelling smoke. The smoke alarms will set off the alarm way before a person can even sense it. And you've got help coming much quicker, and hopefully they can address the fire much quicker. What happens with some fires, and I also did this, we would go to downtown buildings over and over every night. Their alarm systems weren't maintained, poor condition, and they go off every night. Then we would get an attitude that we went there and we would just show up and walk through the building. It was not good, but it happens. And I think that's what was happening there at that library. They had been there enough where they were looking for a smoke or fire, but they weren't in a hurry. They weren't, interviewing people or asking where's the alarm or whatever. And it slows the response time down.
I do remember that. I remember that they were called fairly frequently to non-alarm alarms, which
Right.
that also takes away from people being able to respond to real events and just tires the guys out. You guys work really hard that work in all of these emergency capacities, and you work at a high level when you're working. And so the false alarms are not really a positive for you.
They're not for the people working there. You have a library full of people, and if everybody ignores the alarm because it goes off every day, there's, it sort of doesn't have the effect it should, and no one pays attention, and it's sometimes a tragedy comes out of that.
It can be dangerous. I know if you hear an alarm, you should go stand outside in the parking lot until somebody decides what needs to happen. Don't just stay at the computer because you're busy.
There you go. It's a problem.
And you know, it is. And I know they come in and check our systems and they tell us, we're checking the system, you're going to hear the alarm, just keep working. Well, you can't keep working because the alarm is rather loud and annoying, but that's the way it's supposed to be.
Right.
But they're like, just go about your business. And you're like, yes, thank you. I'll do that. Well, Tom, I really appreciate your time today. Is there anything else of particular interest to you in the book that you want to comment on, something that I may have missed?
Near the end of the book, I was wondering if they were going to mention where fire investigation was at the time of the fire and where it is today. NFPA, National Fire Protection Association, came out with a standard. 921 is the number, but it's what everybody goes to by today. If you're a fire investigator, you have to be certified in this standard. And when you go to court, a defense attorney or anyone is going to be asking you questions from that standard. How did you do your evidence taking? How did you approach the fire? What did you look for? And all of that is spelled out in the standard. And today's fire investigation is so much more technical, more scientific, and we rely on more than just one thing. Like you would see scalding on a basement floor and think it's ignitable liquid was put there. Not necessarily true. And today you would have to look at several things to come up with an idea of what happened. You have to have evidence that you take to a lab, and it has to come back saying there was an ignitable liquid. You can't just smell it and say it's there. There's so much today that has changed for the better, and it makes it much more technical and harder, but you have to do this in a systematic way, and it's better for everybody. It's definitely better for someone that's in charged with that. So in the back of the book where it mentions the scientific method today, it is much better, much more challenging, but gives a lot of credibility to the fire investigator when he's doing his job.
That was really great, Tom. And I am so glad that those new, is it 921 statutes are there to protect the public, and that we have people like you that investigate and help prevent fires, to prevent tragedies and the loss of information and community property. I really appreciate you, and I thank you for your time today.
You're welcome. I enjoyed the book. I learned a lot about libraries, a lot of things I never even thought about, and it was very interesting.
Well, I am really grateful that you chose to read it, because many times people don't. And so I really appreciate that. And St. John's Reads is kind of a big deal for us here in St. Johns County. So if our viewers today are interested in the 5K, you can go to our website and see that we're also doing a 5K on January the 30th in order to cap off the St. John's Reads event. And if you would just like to share, and comment on this, I'd be really grateful. And I want to wish you all the very best. And thank you so much, Tom. Have a great day.
Thank you. Take care.